Introducing our next speaker. She's our youngest speaker today and was also the youngest delegate from Texas to the Republican National Convention in 2008. Paula Stang is the daughter of the great historian and author Alan Stang, who spoke at our rally last year. She's a senior at Houston Baptist University, double majoring in history and political science, and she's just finishing up her senior honors thesis on the Federal Reserve entitled Fractional Reserve Banking and Fiat Currency, a Pattern of Profiteering. Here to remind us of the colorful history of the Federal Reserve and to follow in her father's legacy, please welcome Ms. Paula Stang.
Wow, following my father's legacy. I hope so. I'm really excited to be here. I hope all of you are really excited as well. You know, a lot of people assume that any sort of history of the United States banking system would put them to sleep within minutes. I'm really hoping none of you are those people. I want you to keep a few things in mind as I tell you a short history of the Federal Reserve. On their website, the tagline states that the Federal Reserve, quote, provides the nation with a safe, flexible, and stable monetary and financial system. Sorry, I had to chuckle. By the way, if you get a chance, definitely check out their website. I found the entire thing hilarious. Keep in mind, the Fed says that it has primarily two purposes. The first is to fight a never-ending battle against inflation, which, again, according to their website, we somehow cause. And secondly, to supervise the economy in order to protect us from the booms and busts of the business cycle. I'm sure you already have formed an answer as to whether or not you think they have been successful in these goals. It's difficult to decide in what year a history of the Federal Reserve should begin. It isn't well known that we have actually had 4 central banks, including the Fed. Like the Fed, the previous 3 all operated under a fractional reserve banking system, a system which allows them to print fiat currency, or to create money out of thin air. I don't want to go through these 3 previous central banks, but needless to say, inflation was a huge problem with all of them, and each one was subsequently ended by Congress because of it. Central bankers were always lobbying for a central bank whenever there wasn't one. And why wouldn't they? It's such a lucrative business. 7 such central bankers met in 1910 on Jekyll Island off the coast of Georgia to discuss how they might establish a central bank that would operate under their control. Put together, they represented 1/4 of the world's wealth. Paul Warburg, one of the 7 men at the meeting, was a representative of the Rothschild banking dynasty in France and England. Because of his knowledge of the Bank of England and his great admiration for it, they decided to model the Federal Reserve after it. These men also knew that Congress would not be easily convinced that a central bank would benefit the economy. Because of this, they decided to conduct a media campaign that emphasized the central bank not as a private bank, which was indeed what it was, but as some sort of extension of the federal government. They avoided the word central and chose to replace it with federal. They also wanted to entirely avoid the word bank, instead coming up with something that sounded reassuring and chose the word reserve. Not only was the entire meeting at Jekyll Island, during which the Federal Reserve was formed, shrouded in secrecy, but the name itself was a veil, an attempt to hide what the central bank really was. Mayor Amschad Rothschild, again a European banker whose family remains to this day influential, captured the relationship between the control of money and power expertly. Quote, "Permit me to issue and control the money of the nation, and I care not who makes its laws." I don't think Congress would have passed the Federal Reserve Act of 1913 if they had realized what kind of power they were transferring over to a small group of wealthy men. The historian Ron Chernow stated that, quote, the Jekyll Island meeting would be the fountain of 1,000 conspiracy theories. However, there is no conspiracy being drawn from the meeting. The attendees and their families described what occurred in great detail. And I emphasize this point because not only does the Fed operate outside of all control from Congress, the body to which the Constitution gives sole power to coin money, those who formed the central bank never intended it to be under Congress's control. In an article published in the Saturday Evening Post in 1935, Frank Vanderlip, one of the 7 men to attend the meeting, summed up the events leading up to the creation of the Fed. He stated, quote, despite my views about the value to society of greater publicity for the affairs of corporations, there was an occasion near the close of 1910 when I was as secretive, indeed as furtive, as any conspirator. I did not feel it is any exaggeration to speak of our secret expedition to Jekyll Island as the occasion of the actual conception of what eventually became the Federal Reserve System. Why would anyone go through all this trouble? Why did these 7 men go through all that secrecy and manipulation? I said before that a central bank was lucrative for whomever controls it. How is it lucrative? The answer is the hidden tax of inflation. As awareness concerning the Federal Reserve grows simultaneously with the popularity of H.R. 1207 to audit the Fed, I hope that this inflation tax will cease to be hidden. Fiat money enables government to obtain instant purchasing power. Because this purchasing power was created out of thin air, because it represents nothing of any tangible value, it must come from somewhere. It comes from subtracting purchasing power from somewhere else. That somewhere else is all of us. We suffer through a decline in our own purchasing power. It is in this way that inflation is a tax that we do not immediately notice. Even more, when the Federal Reserve prints money, our wealth is stolen from us. We did not elect anybody in the Fed to represent us. We did not submit to be taxed through inflation. Jefferson said that, quote, everyone through whose hands a bill passed lost on that bill what it lost in value during the time it was in his hands. This was a real tax on him, and in this way the people of the United States actually contributed those millions of dollars during the Revolutionary War, and by a mode of taxation the most oppressive of all, because the most unequal of all. The dollar has lost over 96% of its value in the 96 years that the Fed has been in operation. Americans have also suffered through the crashes of 1921 and 1929, the Great Depression of 1929 to 1939, recessions in 1953, 57, 69, 75, and 81, a stock market Black Monday in 87, the dot-com bubble, and the current recession, which will likely result in a depression. Does this sound like a safe, flexible, and stable monetary and financial system? Has the Fed fulfilled its supposed purposes? No. In the Fed.